Except the lungs, which are the filters for our body, what other organs does this air pollution impact?
The amount of air that you breathe in is far greater than anything else which you're taking in. So if you compare it to how much fluid you're consuming, how much food you're consuming, then you're consuming far more volume of air than anything else. And therefore, what's in that air has the potential to have outsized impact.
Why health span in today's era is more important than a lifespan?
Lifespan, which is really simple, it's just your total years of life. And then a third terminology is called disease span, which is the years of life where you are alive, but you are effectively being kept alive through the interventions of medicines and technology, but you have multiple diseases and conditions that are seriously reducing your quality of life.
What exactly is sugar? And in how many forms today are we consuming it?
So it's a form of carbohydrate. So if you have a complex carbohydrate, as you would find in, say, grains or potato or vegetables, then it's a very, very long chain, effectively, of the chemical building blocks, which, when you break them down, become sugar in the body.
Listeners, we all have been there primarily after pandemic or a little after 2015, as for me, where even hours of sleep does not make it for me. Every morning, I used to wake up feeling tired. I used to be like, I have slept for good 8 to 10 hours straight. Why am I feeling tired? And probably the solution or the answer was hidden in my lifestyle, the regime I was following. And today we have got somebody on our panel, who is going to be helping us demystify it. I'm not going to be sharing what I did to recover from it or to help solve it. I would love to hear from our guests and see if what I did was correct or not, or was it aligned for my body or not. And I would leave it for an expert to help you all understand how to navigate it for your own body and for your own life. But yes, before that, I invite and introduce our speaker for today. It's the narrative that we tell ourselves that matters a lot. And probably that's the cue I would like to give you. And that's what helped me change my life. But yes, without any further ado, let's welcome our guest for today. Hi, Benjamin. How are you?
Hello, Pulkit. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm going to say hello from London, UK, where it's descending into winter, and yet still it's a good day. Pleasure to be here.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Yes, same here from Delhi as well. We are also just getting into winters and enjoying except the air pollution that is surrounding us, enjoying rest of the things.
Well, we have that in London as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's surprising for me.
I think London's got actually one of the worst, it varies hugely from borough to borough, street to street, but
Hmm.
certainly the air quality in London is a big driver of chronic ill health. I think it's attributed to something like 10,000 premature deaths annually.
Oh,
So it's a big factor, frankly. If you're choosing like your environment in order to help shape your future health, then actually the London air quality is probably the worst factor about London.
okay. That's a surprise for me. I wasn't aware that because I've not been out of India, so I wasn't aware that London has such a bad air quality. Um, but Benjamin, before we get into introduction, and since you brought out the point of air pollution, help me understand the impact of this air that we are breathing in, because for us, I believe the oxygen that we are getting is the fuel that drives our life. And now that's becoming probably, I would say, a luxury to get clean air out there.
Mm.
So, how does it really impact our overall health? And except the lungs, which are the filters for our body, what other organs does this air pollution impact?
Sure, that's a great question. So I would point to a few things. One is that the amount of air that you breathe in is far greater than anything else which you're taking in. So if you compare it to how much fluid you're consuming, how much food you're consuming, then you're consuming far more volume of air than anything else. And therefore, what's in that air has the potential to have outsized impact. And what happens in any one organ, in this case, the lungs, is not kept isolated to that organ. So these days, when we talk about the relationships between organs, very often we refer to axes. So you might refer to, for example, the lung, gut, brain axis to say, well, what
Mhm.
happens in the interplay between the lung, the gut, and the brain, which might then start in the lung. So things which happen in one organ have systemic effects throughout the rest of the body. And of course, what we find in outdoor air, well, this is where we are concerned about things like particulate matter and the size of those particles and the nature of those particles. And if we're constantly breathing in air laden with these kind of particles and they're going into the lungs, it's ultimately contributing to a toxic load, which is then added to via other exposures that we have within water, within food, within indoor. Then if we look at the quality of indoor air, where typically exposures are less kind of particulate matter, but there might be things like microplastics, which are being shed from things like carpet or other regular household materials. You might have accumulation of, say, gases from cooking, like butane. You say, well, when is it that your lungs are not actually being presented with this significant toxic burden, which then puts a burden on your body to actually dedicate resources to detoxification? And your body has got a fantastic detoxification system, or rather systems. But what is meaningful is the total demand that you're putting onto it. Because it's not just from air, it's from all those other things as well. And at some point, you might say that the total burden is so so high that you're maybe not completely clearing the toxic load, or that it's consuming so many resources that your body has to perform a form of triage,
Yeah.
saying, "Well, I can't do everything. So if I've got to do this one thing, what can I do less of, like providing you with energy or supporting your reproductive health?" Hence, looking at a complete picture of where are your toxic exposures coming from. I don't often, frankly, get to do that with my clients because they usually have bigger, kind of more understandable goals for us to work on. But it's something I certainly like to do if I get the opportunity.
Amazing, amazing. Help me understand another aspect, Benjamin. And I am relying on the my memory if it serves me well. Around 1920s and 1930s, I believe the lifespan for humans was, pretty less. And I don't have the exact numbers, I don't recall them, but yes, as we have advanced, medicines have advanced, the lifespan for humans have increased beyond 70 years of age. And then we have got people who have been sentinels and have gone even crossed 120 years of age as well. Uh, while I was reading a bio and our discussions, you mentioned something around health span. So can you help us understand the relation between the two and why health span in today's era is more important than a lifespan?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics. So I use three terms. Lifespan, which is really simple. It's just your total years of life.
Hmm.
And then a third term I'll introduce is called disease span, which is the years of life where you are alive, but you are effectively being kept alive through the interventions of medicines and technology, but you have multiple diseases and conditions that are seriously reducing your quality of life. And to a large extent, quite a lot of our gains in lifespan have been achieved through enabling people to live through this disease span. So we might have, say, 80 years of life, but we might spend the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years of that basically suffering poor quality of life, many restrictions on our daily functionality and our ability to kind of enjoy life. And so if we take lifespan and we kind of deduct that disease span, that's health span, your number of years of healthy, enjoyable, normal physiological function. Hence, looking at what we don't really have solutions right now for hugely increasing our lifespan, despite what some personalities might be claiming. But what we do have is very strong interventions for improving our health span, and hence that's where I, as a nutrition and lifestyle medicine practitioner, like to focus. If I work with a client, I can pretty much say with confidence we can improve your health span. Lifespan is a different thing.
I understand. I understand. What are your, comments on the way lifestyle is being influenced these days? Earlier, we used to be walking kilometers or miles, if I put into that perspective, to reach from one destination to another. Public transport infrastructure was more or less, I guess, at the same place, or as
Mm.
with the time it has evolved comparatively better. But yes, walking was an integral part of our daily, commute out there, be it
Mm.
in-house or going to workplaces as well. At the same time, a lot of household chores require us to be moving and doing some physical efforts. But as the human race is evolving, we are becoming more and more comfortable. We are becoming couch potatoes. And how is that impacting our health span?
Great question. And what I think you're describing there is not exercise. It's just movement. And to a large extent, our current environments, our work environments, our home environments, in a lot of places around the world, are now being designed effectively to eliminate movement. So you can imagine the day where you get up, you get into a vehicle of some kind, your own or public transport, to commute to an office where you sit most of the day, and then you get into another vehicle and return yourself, to your home where you sit in front of the TV. So the net effect is like you're what I would call inactive or sedentary the entire time and completely separate from exercise. Even if you do exercise, like even if you do go to the gym and do intense exercise, the time you spend being sedentary is an independent risk factor for multiple causes of mortality, like cardiovascular disease. So designing all that activity outside of your day, unfortunately, that's a feature of our modern environments, but it's one which appears to be very, very negatively impacting our health span.
That
So, I
is,
mean, I do see signs for, optimism here. I mean, I think at this point, a lot of, town, city designers, building architects, the people that actually have a role to play in shaping our environments, the impact is beginning to become better known. And so you say, well, look, if we're designing a new place to live, let's make it livable. Let's put in bike paths. Let's put in green spaces where people can actually spend time outdoors and want to do that. So I do see kind of the growing recognition, but to a large extent, it's still up to us to find the ways around the default, which is, we've eliminated a lot of that movement from our daily activity, from our daily life.
um, I totally, align with you what you just shared, Benjamin. But and yes, I would like to put across another observation, and you can share your thoughts on that. Once upon a time, the things that were available for free and accessible, like just by moving outside our house, the door, today we have to one find time separately or out of our work schedule, pay probably thousands of dollars to travel miles away from our house to get access to clean air, to get access to greenery, to get access to that free time, or that invigorating cradle of nature.
Mm,
10,
mm,
20 years back, it was all available just outside our doors. So, what are your thoughts and how it has impacted? Because, as we are evolving slowly, growing, I will not say evolving, but yes, growing into the modern day human era, everything that is supposedly required for our existence is becoming adulterated. The food we
mm,
eat is not clean. We have got a lot of insecticides, pesticides, and I don't know what all genetically modified seeds are coming out. That's becoming a challenge. The water we are drinking is, artificially having artificially added minerals into it through reverse osmosis processes or water softeners coming out. The water is not drinkable. Not today. We both had started the episode by discussing that the air we are breathing, it's not pure. The food, the water, the air. I believe these are three basic essentials for a human life to survive. And all of
mhm.
these three are not available to us. So how does it impact our health span? And we have ensured that we now start paying to get the quality of these three essentials, whereas
Mm.
it was available for free some time back.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's quite a, in some ways, depressing kind of realization that these major influences on our health are all one. You can say that all those environmental influences, we're not choosing those to some extent. They're kind of imposed upon us because they're environment that we live in. I do want to make a book recommendation to you and your listeners, which is I just hosted a big event a couple of weeks ago where we had a fantastic ecological doctor called Dr. Jenny Goodman.
Mhm.
She's written two books. One of them is called Getting Healthy in Toxic Times. And within that, she basically kind of describes what you just described, except at much greater length. and then goes through in great detail. Well, if you look at your water supply, if you look at your, your food, if you look at the air you're breathing, if you look at your other exposure to, and if you look at being able to move, if you look at your exposure to toxins, you can't eliminate all the negative influences, but you can, to some extent, mitigate. So you can mitigate, and then you can say, well, if I'm choosing where to live and where to work and what to buy and where to what to eat and what to drink, then there are interventions available which at least put you in a better position. If we talk about indoor air quality, we've got access to, and of course, there's always assumptions here about the resources which you have available, but there are solutions like, use an indoor air purifier, have air scrubbing plants. If we're talking about, diet, we can say, again, if you've got the resources, try and, buy what I would call regeneratively farmed food or organic food or, seasonal or local food where you can actually talk to or at least know who is growing it and know how they're growing it. If we talk about building in movement tea day, then so something I often discuss with my individual clients who I'm going to be encouraging them to exercise and move, which are two different things. And if they struggle to find time to build in, let's say, a block of 45 minutes to exercise. Now, just like you say, if you go back, long enough, you might say, well, it would have been ludicrous to expect, our ancestors to find 45 minutes to commute to a gym to lift some weights and then to commute back over to the gym. That would be ludicrous. And now it's like, well, you've got to do that. If you struggle to do that, I mean, something which I often talk about is literally just using exercise snacks, which is not eating. It's literally just saying, hey, I don't have 45 minutes, or maybe I don't have time to commute, but do I have 5 minutes? Because if I've got 5 minutes, I can do an exercise snack. For 5 minutes, I can do something like, run on the spot, a whole bunch of press ups, kind of wall pulls, etc. I can make it intense within whatever's safe for me personally. And if you add those up throughout the day, they can actually contribute to getting to more or less the same place as the 45 minutes, so long as you kind of change your mindset about how you're going to fit it into your day.
Share that the narrative that we tell ourselves really matters. And I will just share a personal anecdote over here. For a large part of my professional life, I graduated in 2015, and after that, I always told myself I don't have enough time.
Mm,
While I had got myself engrossed in, getting my startup up and running, my daily schedule was quite erratic. I didn't have any fixed sleeping time. I didn't have any fixed waking up time. I didn't have any fixed eating habits. Whenever whatever I wanted to feel, I used to order up, and with food delivery services coming into picture, it became quite easy to get your hands on the junk food out there. So you just
yeah.
had to press few, make some taps on your mobile screen, and there's this pizza and burgers outside your door ready to be eaten. So I've
Yeah.
done all that for quite a number of years. But then there were some wake up alarms that my body gave me, and
Mm,
I started introspecting. It didn't happen overnight for me. It didn't happen over a few weeks. It has taken me at least 3 to 4 years to get where I am today. uh,
hmm
to a certain extent, yes, I have been able to manage my sleep schedule. uh, I have gotten very comparatively better and regular with my exercise regime. So
hmm
most of the days in a week now, I do 6 to 7 in the morning yoga. And for a long time, I said, I don't have no time for going out for cardio. I have done meditation, I've done whatever stretches and asanas my yoga teacher gets me to do. And I was like, I'm still feeling and facing that breathlessness in myself. I'm not finding that energy. And
mm,
for a long time I was not able to do it, but yeah, thanks to one of the groups I joined through my MBA college called Sweat Equity, I just said, okay, let's do an experiment. Let's try and go for a walk. Just I will go and cover 1 perimeter of the park that's close to my house. And it's been now 3 months. I at least ensure 4 days out of 7 days in a week I am at that park. And
mm,
to an extent where, yes, I do take that one single perimeter walk, but yes, in between I am able to add 2 to 3 minutes of run as well, which is
mm,
helping me now feel a little bit more energetic. Yes, I do have to come back and take 15 to 20 minutes of power nap at times, but yes, then
hmm
rest of my day is energetic. I am able to focus better, I am able to concentrate better, and it has I can see a lot of better, outputs of my body, my health out there. So
Yeah.
that's where I believe it's totally the narrative we tell. I still start my day only 15 minutes later than what I usually used to.
Mm.
And I end my day, okay, 15, 20 minutes later than I used to. But that 2 hours of dedication that I've given, hours I've dedicated to my own health is really helping me stay up my game.
Yeah, it's a great story, and one I'm delighted that you kind of made that personal progress, and you've done it by the sounds of it, without huge imposition on your life. I mean, what you're really making me think of is that for a lot of busy people, professionals, parents, people working multiple jobs, it's really challenging to prioritize the habits which are health supporting, especially when the payoff is in the distance. And what I mean by that is there's a phenomenon where preventative medicine, the kind that I practice, the interventions that are positive tend to have benefits that occur in the future, whereas the burden or the pain points occur right away, right?
Yep.
So take, say intense exercise. I mean, in the moment, it's a burden because you got to make time for it. You got to go somewhere. You got to do it. It can be unpleasant, especially when
Yep.
you're first starting. I mean, yes, you might enjoy some endorphins, some endocannabinoids, some brain-derived neurotrophic factor in the moment, right? But in the real payoff is your years of healthy normal function, mobility, independence, which might be kind of 5, 10, 15, 20 years away. In contrast, the habits which are harmful tend to offer like an immediate payoff where the harm is distant. So, think about, a candy bar, a donut, whatever kind of treat you crave, gives you an immediate kind of pleasure payoff. And you can do it lots and lots and lots of times without, the harm manifesting itself. But then months away, 5 years away, that's when the harm manifests. So it's like you got this inverse relationship between, the immediate kind of experience and the payoff, which I think is what sabotages a lot of us, especially when confronted with, family, work, all the demands of our time, to actually make the smarter choices for ourselves for the long term. I mean, what one concept I don't know if this works for everyone. Well, it doesn't work for everyone. But I love to at least introduce the idea that you're in a relationship with your future self. So you're in a relationship with the future version of yourself in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And so anything that you do, which is positive, you're giving a gift to the future version of yourself. And you can imagine literally like writing a note to them saying, well, today I went for a run. It was horrible, but I did this for you. So you're paying forward to the future version of yourself. You're giving yourself the gift of good health in the future. And really, what better gift would your future self want than that?
Wow. Well, that's an amazing way to look at it. And I believe we need to find the narratives that work for us. Probably it could be having a relationship with the future self, or the way I went for smaller steps, and today it is, evolved into a place where it is 2 hours of time that I'm dedicating for myself. But I believe it's that go out and explore yourself, expose yourself to things that, give you that opportunity to identify what really works for me. It could gyms doesn't do not work for me. I have a
Mm,
lot of friends who have been recommending me go to gyms. It's polluted out there. It's not safe to breathe. But I know gyms don't work for me. The moment I decide to go to gym and leave my morning walk, I would not be able to stay consistent. I have tried it multiple times.
mm,
And so everybody has got their own muse. Like in creative writing, we say that you need to find your muse. So
mhm.
probably even it is applicable for the lifestyle as well. You need to find your muse and then build onto it.
Yes, certainly. It's one of the very often repeated pieces of advice with regards to at least programming exercise into your daily, weekly routine is whilst, yes, there is a lot of advantage in making sure that you do certain types of exercise, certain intensities of exercise. I mean, you start off with saying, find the exercise which you can commit to, that you can make consistent. Because if nothing else, that's going to be the best thing. If there's a whole bunch of friction between you and doing the thing, willpower is never going to get you through that. Basically, you need to kind of remove some of the barriers, which might be commuting, might be the environment which you don't enjoy. You need to remove those barriers and find another solution and find something which you can do. So, I mean, I love to talk about. training for power and training for size and strength and VO2 max and all these things. And yes, they're helpful. But the starting point has got to be what can you actually stick to and enjoy and make consistent?
That's true. That's true. And before I get on to my next question, primarily, can you help us break down what consistency would actually mean? For me, what it actually means is getting back to your schedule. You would have days where you are not able to get up on time. There are going to be days where you're not able to get to your health regime. But yes, if you get back to it, and probably I'm not saying the gaps need to be very are very large. Probably a day or two of relaxation is also required. What are your thoughts on that? And what can be of how do you define consistency out there?
Mm. Well, yeah, if I apply it in the context of exercise, at least,
Mhm.
I think there is benefit in planning. I think there is benefit in planning and saying, okay, well, what can I program into my day? And the reason I think there's benefit in this is if you leave it to how you feel in a given moment on a given day, if you say, well, I'll go to the gym or do my exercise depending upon how I get through the day, there's so many other things which can then displace that intention. You get a late kind of work request, you get an email which kind of causes you some stress, you got to go shopping on the way home. So if you don't plan, I find if you don't actually block out the time to actually do something, then there's so many other things which are going to consume that time that you just never get to the thing which you want to do. So for me, consistency would mean literally, I would call it time boxing. Call out here to Atomic Habits and James Clear for advocating for this. Is saying like create blocks of time where you're giving yourself the gift of this is the time that I'm going to spend exercising or whatever it is that you want to do more of, which is health supporting for you and mental health supporting for you. Block it out and plan it. And that's how you create the opportunity for consistency.
Oh, amazing, amazing. That's a very nice way of putting it. Um, Benjamin, what would be the five non-negotiables as per you to increase our health span out there, given the lifestyle we are living today?
Five non-negotiables. Okay, yeah. First one actually is come back to what you were talking about when you introduced our conversation here, which would I would say number one is sleep quality and sleep quantity. It's honestly worth being a sleep professional, making yourself a sleep professional to say, this is my top priority. I will give myself the best opportunity to enjoy sleep quantity enough and sleep quality, good quality sleep. That'd be my number one. My number two, which is kind of related, would be to enable your alignment with your natural circadian biology. And this is not kind of woo. There's very, very strong, robust science to say that we thrive when we align with our natural circadian rhythm, which basically means things like getting daylight exposure as early as possible within the day. It means things like being in a kind of a relaxation, rest and digest mode in the evening. And certainly, although I mean, I'm here in the UK now, and as we head into winter, well, we're in winter, that daylight exposure becomes scarce, and you maybe can't get it in the morning. But that's where I would say, look at a substitute. Look at getting, say, a cheap 10,000 lux light box, which is like a bright light which you sit in front of, and sit in front of that for 20 minutes each day to simulate the exposure to daylight if you can't get that naturally. So there are solutions. So number two would be support your natural circadian biology. Number three, I would say, would be exercise. And here, I mean, I do want to make a case for, intense developmental progressive exercise. I mean, walking, it's fantastic. Walking in nature, even better. Walking with friends and family, even better. But there's also value in incorporating exercise which maintains or develops your power, your muscle size, your strength. So I definitely say, well, that's worth being point number three. Point number four, diet. I'm finally getting to it. I'm a nutritionist. I'm finally getting to diet. I'll keep it simple. I'd say, you know, favor a diverse, micro and phytonutrient rich diet, emphasizing whole foods and minimizing but not eliminating, say, ultra processed foods. And my point five, oh, it's a tough one. For point five, I'm going to say, oh no, it's not a tough one. It's really easy. Because so far I've talked about effectively diet and lifestyle medicine. or nutritional lifestyle medicine. My point five is going to be making time for social connection, joy, and purpose. Because, without that in your life, the first four things, arguably, why do they matter? So find time to, nourish and build social connections and have something which you enjoy doing and you're contributing to and you feel like is important to you.
Amazing, amazing. I totally align with all the 5 points that you have just shared. Thanks a lot for sharing those. Um, you know, let's get into a little bit of discussion around nutrition and diet out there. Um, I've heard that what we become what we eat. I was just listening to something a clip by Osho in the morning on Instagram. And this is one of the lines that he said that you become what you eat. Now, in today's time where I am not able to get my hands onto I would pure might be a very escalated word to use, but yes, good food or good alternatives to food to eat, which is not infected with insecticides or pesticides out there. I am not able to get, and plus over that, I get easy access to processed foods and everything that's not good for my body, to an extent that if I need to get a proper salad onto my plate, I need to pay at least twice of what I pay usually for a junk food.
Hmm.
So eating healthy is also becoming expensive these days. So what are your thoughts on that? How do I, really manage my diet in such a scenario where the food that's not good for my body is economical, is easily available, vis-a-vis the healthy food is difficult to find and expensive?
Yeah, for some, I want to acknowledge that indeed, if we talk about either highly processed or ultra processed foods, then they are very often, this varies a little bit between countries, but very often effectively they're just a combination of some kind of grain-based starch, some kind of industrially extracted seed oil, which is often called vegetable oil, which for some reason, and then sugar. And if you walk through, certainly in the UK, a typical supermarket in the UK, which is where most people buy their food, and you walk down the aisles, you'll see that like if there's 10,000 products, and a lot of British supermarkets will have an enormous variety of products, but maybe say three-quarters of those are just kind of different formulations of starches, oils, sugar, and then the emulsifiers, preservatives, additives, etc. And they're because all those ingredients are very cheap, and because our large food companies, we can call them big food if we want to, are very, very good at making them palatable, pleasurable, or we might say hyper palatable. And because they're very, very good at distributing them, literally putting them into the environment, no matter where we are. I went through an airport recently and I noticed there was new Ben and Jerry's ice cream dispensers in the departure lounge, and it was tiny departure lounges. I just thought, well, oh my goodness me! So literally, there's no way you can be where ice cream is not more than like an arm's reach away from you, which of course has a huge effect. Um, so yes, acknowledging that our food environment in that way is horrendous, and I think an enormous negative impact upon our human health. And so, what's the solution? Well, it would be lovely to expect that the food environment would change. It would be lovely to expect that. But I don't see how that's going to happen. I think in the absence of at least national level regulation of big food and changing the food environment, I don't see that that's going to change, which means it shouldn't be, but it's kind of on us to make the change for ourselves. So, what's helpful there? I think there are a few practices which become very helpful. One of them is literally just having food preparation skills. A lot of us don't have that. Food preparation skills and some tools. And a lot of people don't have that. If you don't know how to make a few recipes which you enjoy, then of course you're going to choose the easy option of processed foods because at least then you can get some enjoyment from food. So literally, if you don't already have those skills, then however you like to do it, you might like to follow along a bunch of recipe makers on YouTube. There's plenty of them. It might be even more powerful for you though to like enroll yourself into like a weekend cooking class and be together with other people and learn to cook together. Maybe, your parents or your grandparents can teach you how to just do a few basic, recipes which you can make over and over again and really enjoy them. So I think, argument number one for me would be the skills and the tools. Really, really high value investment for life. Um, Maybe a second kind of strong suggestion would be planning. Um, I find again, if you don't plan a little, this isn't going to work for everyone. I know that. But if you don't plan to some extent your meals, and if you're a busy professional or parent, etc., then the easiest thing is always going to be for you to buy the prepared food, to buy the processed food. It's always going to be easier. So this is where, for again, a lot of my clients, I find that it's really helpful to do some batch cooking. So combine this with finding just a handful of recipes which you get good at and you're comfortable with and you like, and then say, right, well, instead of making those once, I'll make a batch which is enough for, let's say, 5 or 6 servings. I'll freeze most of it. I'll eat some of it, and I'll keep on doing that. Maybe I can dedicate a half day a week to doing a whole bunch of batch cooking, which means I can put a whole bunch of different plants and legumes and mushrooms and different meats, etc. inside that, and then I can enjoy that diversity and the flavor throughout the week. So two little things, skills and tools and planning and batch cooking, I think are just like micro level individual things you can do to help have more positive dietary value.
Well, no. Just one follow-up on that, Benjamin, where, as per a lot of Ayurveda, if we go towards that, or the natural healing pathies out there, they advocate a lot on cooking everything fresh the moment you're going to be eating and not using a lot of refrigerated foods out there. So what are your, any thoughts on that?
Hmm. So I want to question the word fresh to begin with. And again, I'm going to speak a little bit from a UK context, but it would work also in the US. And I'll confess to being ignorant about your local food environment. Certainly, if I talk about the UK, and I think a lot of other kind of countries where supermarkets are the dominant way of people getting their food, then what is fresh there is often not so fresh. Because if your supermarket is selling you the same food year round, and that means that, when you're buying, say, asparagus locally, it's actually being flown in from Peru or somewhere. Then how can it be fresh? I mean, if it was fresh when it was harvested, then it can't be fresh by the time it arrives into a store like days, weeks later. And what often happens, therefore, with this food is it's being picked before it was ripe, and then it's being kept in an environment which kind of retards its kind of development, so that it's at least not spoiled when it's in the supermarket in front of you. But is that fresh? Because if that's fresh, I don't know what that means. So by contrast, if you look at, say, frozen food, which is often kind of, again, if I speak from my UK perspective, it's often regarded as worse food. But if you take, say, frozen berries, then they're picked often when they are literally fresh, because then they're frozen right away, which means they can then be preserved. And if you look at the kind of nutrient value between, say, completely fresh berries and frozen berries, they're very similar. And so I'd much prefer to, for example, choose frozen berries which were frozen when they were fresh than fresh berries which aren't actually all that fresh. Um, I would also say that rather than thinking about maybe just always is it fresh or frozen or preserved, is it seasonal? So is this food which is either grown and harvested locally seasonal or even globally seasonal, as opposed to it's completely out of season, which means if you think about how it's grown and harvested and preserved and transported, then that's kind of the outcome of some kind of industrial intervention process, as opposed to it just being farmers who are harvesting their crops. So frozen food can be very powerful and very nutrient dense, and seasonality is a way also to guide your food choices.
Amazing, amazing. I thanks a lot for, making that point clear. And one more question, I would like to discuss based on your response. You talked about sugar, and
Mm.
there's a lot of fuss going around about sugar. So I've got two or three questions which I would like you to answer for our audience. One, what exactly is sugar, and in how many forms today are we consuming it?
Mm. I mean, sh sugar is simply. I mean, so it's a form of carbohydrate. It's the simplest form of carbohydrate, effectively. So if you have a complex carbohydrate, as you would find in, say grains or potato or vegetables, then it's a very, very long chain, effectively, of the chemical building blocks, which, when you break them down, become sugar in the body. So effectively, when we consume sugar, um, it's the same as what happens after we digest something like bread or potatoes or pasta or rice, etc. But by putting it into our body as sugar, our body doesn't have to digest it, or it hardly has to digest it. Um, it's not at all satiating, so your body doesn't experience the process of having to break something down into its component parts. So it skips that bit. It's just giving you something which can be immediately absorbed with almost no effort. So it doesn't give you any satisfaction. There's no time involved. There's no chewing involved. You don't have time to really kind of process with your brain that you're actually consuming something because it's so readily consumed. It's very pleasant, which might encourage you to have more of it. And whenever you kind of, if you think about, again, if we refer to, let's say, our ancestral human ancestors, and you think, well, where could they have consumed sugar from? And it's very few places. I think the classic example is say, well, we could have consumed honey, which is a combination of sucrose and fructose. Sorry, glucose and fructose, which is the sucrose. And then you say, well, how would we get honey? And you get this ridiculous kind of. It's great to kind of see like a recreation of this on YouTube. You get this ridiculous situation where there's a beehive up in a tree, and you've got to go like climb the tree with a burning torch so you can reach across to the beehive and like let the smoke like encourage the bees to leave, and then you've got to like put the torch away in order to access the hive and hope that the bees don't return to sting you. And so you might do this like 2 or 3 times a year. Now if we're doing that every single day, well, you mentioned the difference between evolution and adaptation earlier on. Well, for sure we have not evolved to cope with the daily consumption of very, very large amounts of sugar. So, but that's the situation we're in now. Sugar is everywhere for us all the time.
Understood. Understood. So help me understand in what all forms are we consuming? Like you
Oh,
talked about
yeah.
beans and all that. So for the listeners to easily identify which is a good sugar and which is a bad sugar to consume.
I'd find it, yeah, so that was the second part of your question. Thank you for reminding me. I mean, I would find it challenging to say that there's any good sugar in the sense that it's not, I mean, we have no dietary requirement for sugar.
Okay.
We could argue that we don't really have a dietary requirement for carbohydrate either, but for certain, there's value in consuming dietary carbohydrate, and there's no need for most people to eliminate it or even to restrict it. Um, So I think if we start looking at, let's say, packaged food or food which comes in some kind of can or wrapper, etc., I think a thing to look out for is a trick which a lot of food manufacturers use, which is if we say, well, what kind of sugar are there? And we can say, well, there's glucose and there's fructose and there's sucrose and there's maltodextrin, there's galactose, lactose, and then there's things like we can play around with the words, like we can say there's coconut blossom nectar, right? What's that? It's just sugar. So very often, what a processed food will do is it will have, say, 5 different types of sugar in it. And by in a lot of countries, the food labeling requires a manufacturer to put the ingredients on the packet, reflecting the volume of that ingredient in the product. So one little kind of hack you can use is if you have 5 different types of sugar, then instead of having sugar as the first ingredient, it might be, say, the fourth ingredient, the sixth ingredient, the eighth ingredient, the 10th ingredient. But if you add them all together, it's the first ingredient once you know all the names of the sugars. So that's kind of one thing to look out for is how if you literally just like walk through again the food market and you're looking at like packaged food and you flip it around and say, well, do I recognize any of the names for sugar here? How many of them are in one product? That's my top tip for being aware of how much sugar you're taking in. And then with regards to the what's the good sugar, again, there isn't one. Meaning, again, sugar doesn't, unless you are, let's say, running a marathon and you need, a sports nutrition fueling solution to enable you to absorb, you basically have a fast supply of energy which requires minimal digestion, then sugar is never really helping you. That said, I would say that if you are gonna enjoy a little bit of sugar, but that's okay. It's the little bit that's the point. And then just pick the sugar which you enjoy. Maybe it's maple syrup, that's my favorite, and have tiny quantities of it. So like, train your palate that you can have a tiny little treat of maple syrup, maybe, within your kind of breakfast bowl, and add it to what you're eating. So rather than it being already built in, like to some like instant oat or something, choose to take the bowl of, the bottle of maple syrup and give yourself, a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons of it. And so you know the dose that you're getting rather than it being already injected into your food.
Understood. Understood. One final question about sugar, Benjamin, I would like to ask is with Instagram becoming very easily accessible and a lot of people in the race to get more and more views and followers, there are blanket claims coming around saying that leave sugar for 45 days, your body will change, you will start losing weight. How much substance is out there in these claims? And if there is, how can individuals identify to navigate it? Because as far as
Mm.
my understanding goes, it cannot be same for everyone. Somebody leaving sugar for straight 40 days, 15 days even, or for 5 days might have some side effects which not be in alignment to the reason with which they would be looking to leave that sugar.
I think there actually is value in these kind of no sugar resets.
Mhm.
And I think the value is, I mean, yes, excess sugar in the diet is directly physiologically harmful. Yes. However, it's not itself, I believe and understand, the driver of things like fatty liver disease, or obesity, because ultimately that's driven by energy balance. Meaning, if you consume excess energy, excess calories for long enough, you will accumulate adipose tissue fat. You will, progress towards fatty liver. You'll progress towards diabetes because of those things. It's not, I don't understand that it's the sugar itself that's doing that, but rather it's the role sugar plays in your overall diet. Because if you consuming, considerable amount of added sugar in the diet, one, that's displacing more nutritious food because sugar is not giving you any micronutrients or negligible micronutrients. It's not giving you any amino acids, proteins. It's not giving you any fiber, which your gut bacteria can thrive on. It's giving you just literally energy source, and that's it. So it's contributing very little in terms of value. But then it's what it does with your brain. Because if your palate and your kind of dopamine reward centers are wired to seek food pleasure through sugar, then you're very likely to eat more because it is pleasurable. Yeah, we know that. So it's not so much that sugar itself is, let's say, uniquely bad. It's more, it makes it much more likely that you will overeat and make poor food choices. And it's that combination of low nutrient density and high, palatability and energy density that actually contributes to the harms of sugar. And therefore, yeah, I actually think there's value in doing something like a sugar reset where you're, challenging yourself to eliminate sugar because then you'll experience, well, can I live? Can I actually find pleasure in food without relying upon sweetness and sugar? And if you find that the answer is yes, that's so empowering for then making different choices.
Mhm. Amazing, amazing. And we were discussing about Movember out there. So from sugar, let's move to often not discussed topic out there, that's men's health. I believe that's one of the topics which requires a lot of discussion, but is not often brought up. So let's hear your thoughts about why, in today's scenario where we started with discussing about air pollution, then
Mm,
we, came on to the health span aspect of things, and then finally we discussed about sugar.
mm.
Across all these factors, how is men's health being impacted, and what would you like to suggest?
I mean, first of all, yeah. So just explaining for anyone that might not be familiar. So Movember, which is the grow moustache version of November, which is Men's Health Month. I mean, the idea is it's the time to talk about men's health, and it's getting at the issue that men talk about their health and seek help with their health a lot less readily than female. Of course, that varies. But men have, for example, high rates of depression, suicide. We can reference the male loneliness epidemic, and these are kind of mental and emotional health issues, which also have physical and then sexual health symptoms as well. So they're all kind of connected. Um, I mean, adding to that, I think if we look at kind of one marker of men's health, which is natural testosterone, we can see that there's been this almost kind of, it's not funny, but we see this kind of ridiculous phenomenon over the last 10, 20 years where some of the labs which are measuring testosterone when they're testing it have revised downwards the reference ranges for testosterone. And they haven't done that because we have new understanding of what is a normal, desirable level of testosterone. They're doing it because male testosterone is declining globally. So literally, they're just saying, right, okay, well, if we take the mean average and we kind of have a reference range which is two standard deviations from that mean, it's all moved downwards. That's not a good thing, you know. So I think there are a lot of threats to men's health, and it is very, very useful to talk about it more often and say, well, what can we do individually? And what can I do as a practitioner to support improved health?
Understood. Understood. Um, can you help us understand a bit more about testosterone and how is it linked with the food we eat? How the diet that we are having impacts our testosterone levels and
Mm.
its overall production in the body?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are some specific dietary features which are associated and potentially, have a causal relationship with testosterone. But before I get to those, I'll just mention that what you eat, of course, goes through your digestive system, influences the health of your gut. So I might just mention that there is a strong link between gut health and your male hormonal health. And partly this is because what happens in your gut, especially what happens in your large intestine, which is where we house most of our gut microbiota, our gut bacteria, they have a huge role to play in inflammation and immune signaling. So, like an unhealthy kind of microbiota is going to often result in higher levels of chronic inflammation, so low-grade chronic inflammation, and the proliferation of pro-inflammatory cytokines, things like interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, things which a lot of us kind of picked up the vocabulary of within pandemic. And these suppress testosterone production. They suppress it directly in the Leydig cells and the testes, but they also suppress the signaling from the hypothalamus, which is like the first part of the chain to give the instruction to the testes to produce testosterone. So what we kind of, the diet that we eat influences our gut health, and then that influences our hormonal health. Another example, if you have what's often called leaky gut, I would call it intestinal permeability, but it's basically where the cell lining in your small intestine, instead of being intact and strong and robust and making sure that things do not pass into circulation, your bloodstream, your lymphatic drainage, which shouldn't be there, some of them start getting through, like undigested food particles, pathogens, bacteria, and that causes something called metabolic endotoxemia, which is again going to raise chronic inflammation and immune activity. That's also associated and probably is causal driver of lower total and also lower free testosterone and increased sex hormone binding globulin, which I can explain if that's useful, and also poorer insulin sensitivity and worsening insulin sensitivity. So just as a recap, insulin sensitivity is what you want. Insulin resistance is what you do not want. Because insulin as well, how sensitive you are gives you a better opportunity for producing natural testosterone. So all these things, all these kind of gut health mediated factors act against your opportunity for healthy, normal production of testosterone. I'm going to pause there before I go on to describe some of the dietary features which are associated with worse outcomes and better outcomes, just in case you want to ask me any clarification questions.
No, sure, sure. You can continue because I have a follow-up question around how is the production and quality of testosterone, what we eat, impacting the sexual drive in men today. I would really like to
Mm.
love to hear your thoughts on that because with decreasing testosterone levels in the human bodies, the male bodies out there, um, it's somewhere or the other. I believe it's a complete circle that's sort of impacting the men's health out there, and it impacts the sexual health. And if they are not able to perform, it impacts the emotional health, which further adds to
Yeah.
their stress. So I would love to hear your views. But yes, why don't you first complete your answer for the previous one, and then we can get on to this.
Yeah. I mean, just agreeing with you. So when we talk about testosterone, if we talk about low testosterone, then it manifests ultimately in four types of symptoms. Some of the symptoms are physical, and this can be things like poorer body composition, more fat around the abdomen, less muscle, less energy, so physical symptoms. There can also be then mental symptoms like trouble concentrating, trouble paying attention, brain fog, trouble with recall. So basically, kind of trouble laying down memories and accessing memories. They've got emotional symptoms like you might not be, let's say, depression. It could be depression, but it can also just be a loss of interest, a loss of, passion for life. Nothing seems particularly compelling anymore. Everything's a bit grey. And then finally, the last basket of symptoms, which are often present but not always, are sexual. And this can be, for example, erectile dysfunction. It could also just be a loss of desire. You don't feel the desire to have sex. It can also be a lovely thing, reduced tumescence, which is basically like your experience of like spontaneous erections. And so it's these kind of four things. And unfortunately, one of the challenges is that none of these things are specific to low testosterone. So they can all occur for other reasons. So sometimes it's difficult to figure out, well, is that the reason? And is it worth getting checked? And is that going to solve the problem if you had natural healthy levels of testosterone? So that's one piece is that those four kind of categories of symptoms, they can occur all together, or you might just get some of them. And the pattern between different males varies. I'm going to shout out a self-assessment tool called ADAM, which is just androgen deficiency in the aging male. Frankly, it's poorly named because it shouldn't refer to aging males. You don't have to be aging or any particular age to one, be interested in your testosterone, two, be experiencing low testosterone and the symptoms of it. But it is a clinically validated assessment tool, meaning if you take the ADAM questionnaire, which is completely freely available in different places on the web, and we can include a link maybe in your show notes, it's just a way of reflecting on, do I see three or four or five or six, symptoms which are associated with low testosterone? And that then might be for you, the impetus to go out and speak to a professional like myself, to get tested, to have your personal picture revealed to you.
Right.
Okay, I think I was supposed to also talk about dietary features which are helpful and harmful. Should I roll right onto that?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure, sure. Please go ahead.
So we can say that there are some things which are associated with low testosterone, and there are some things which are associated with high testosterone, and then there's also some things for which there's no clear outcome. So I'll first of all mention the things which are associated with lower testosterone. One is a very, very low fat diet. And by very, very low fat, I mean when your percentage of calories from fat is under 20%. And that might be to a large extent because your intake of essential fatty acids and fat it's a very, very important building block for a lot of your hormones. So if you're actually struggling to have sufficient sources of dietary fat, saturated fatty acids, essential fatty acids, then you might literally be undersupplying the body with what it needs, the resources for producing the hormones. So that's number one. Very, very low fat is not so good. Very, very low carb is also problematic. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the ketogenic diet here, but if you go low carb but not ketogenic, so when your carbohydrate intake goes below 35% of your total energy, that is associated also with low testosterone. Um, Very, very high protein isn't particularly helpful, but I'm talking again, let me quantify because when these terms are used, often they're not quantified, unfortunately. So when I say very, very high protein, I mean in excess of, say, 3.4 grams per kilogram of body weight, which almost no one is consuming that. Um, so that it seems to be problematic when you start going very, very high. Um, for athletes or this active exercises, there's a phenomenon called low energy availability or reduced or relative energy deficiency in sport, REDS. And so if you're chronically under eating, like you are, your activity and your basal metabolic rate is higher than your intake of energy, that low energy availability state can also drive low testosterone. Probably again because your body's saying, I do not have enough resources to do everything. So what can I cut back on? Well, it's apparently not very important to reproduce right now because I'm only just barely surviving. So I will not, initiate the resources to maintain my reproductive health. The other thing which we can say is at least probably harmful for testosterone is a high consumption of ultra processed foods. So, refined grain products, added sugar products, fried foods. They're at the very best, they're harmful. But then the good news, what's kind of associated with higher testosterone? This would be higher intakes of a diverse variety of plant-based foods. It would be a sufficient, modest intake of saturated fats and also mono unsaturated fats. Um, and then there's some like novelties, like we actually find that having a higher proportion of homemade foods drives high testosterone or is associated with. And that might be as much because of the social connection as it is, or it might be the nature of the food. Like when you're cooking it, when you're making food yourself, it's maybe what you're not putting in it, because you're not, nobody adds emulsifiers. Well, okay, you're unlikely to add preservatives and additives and flavorings and sweetening agents and emulsifiers when you're doing home cooking, right? I mean, you might use an emulsifier like, say, egg yolk, but you're not going to be adding what gets into ultra processed foods. It's what you're not putting in. Um, there's some novelties like, say, whey protein post-exercise also is associated with high testosterone, but that's probably more of a novelty than a recommendation, frankly. So that's my little rundown of things which are net harmful and net helpful for lower and high testosterone.
Well, that's been really helpful. Um, Benjamin, before we finally conclude the episode, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I'm going to pick something which is what's, say, one one or two myths related to men's health and testosterone that I would like weren't there. And I'd say number one is that a decline in testosterone is just like normal and inevitable, because that's actually not what the data tell us. The data tell us that actually a lot of males are able to maintain their testosterone from age 20 to around about age 60, after which there's kind of a gentle decline. What kind of obscures that is that some men experience a huge precipitous decline, but it's not genetics is not driving that, at least not most of the time. What's driving it is diet and lifestyle. So if you eat a terrible quality diet, if you allow your body fat to increase, and I know that's tough, but if you do that, and then you spend years of that, it's those years that result in the decline of natural testosterone, as opposed to just years themselves. In other words, it's the quality of years as opposed to the years that really determines your health outcomes. And then I think number two, I mean, my domain as a practitioner working with clients is nutrition and lifestyle medicine. So I don't use, I do not prescribe, nor could I prescribe medications, drugs, or surgery, right? There's a big role for those. But what I say is another myth is that if you do not have sufficient natural testosterone production and you've done all the good things using nutritional lifestyle medicine, um, if you look at testosterone therapy, then there was this horrible kind of myth that testosterone therapy would cause prostate cancer, which persisted for many decades. And do you have a couple of minutes where I can give you the backstory for that?
Sure. Please go ahead.
So it's a crazy science story. I think it's a wonderful little story to kind of follow to understand how sometimes mistakes can be made. So, back in 1941, there was a researcher called Charles Huggins, and he showed that in males that had been castrated, so they had no testosterone production. In males that had been castrated, if you then administered, exogenous, outside the body testosterone, and they already had they already had tumors in the prostate, then administering testosterone caused the tumors to grow. Right? So they had these tumors, they were castrated, the tumors stopped growing. If you administered external testosterone, the tumors started growing again. From that came the inference that androgens and testosterone fuel prostate cancer. And that idea percolated into the default clinical mindset and understanding. That's not what that data said. So Huggins' research only showed that androgens stimulate growth of existing tumors, not that they initiate the development of those tumors. And then only in castrated men. And he only used, by the way, this whole study was based on three subjects. Three subjects. So not like 10,000, not 1,000, not 100, three subjects. So now, today, we have many randomized controlled trials, human randomized controlled trials. We have meta-analyses which are finding no association between testosterone therapy and the risk of developing prostate cancer. So, in other words, if you're in this position, if you're a male who finds that they have low testosterone, then I would just say, look, talk about the possibility of testosterone therapy because it can, if it's appropriate for you, be absolutely life-changing.
Well, well. So I guess a lot of things depend on the dialogue and the narratives we tell ourselves, if I have to go back to that place. Uh, but thanks a lot, Benjamin, for sharing such depth of knowledge with us and, making it more scientific and quantifiable out there. It happens very seldom that we get to hear scientific claims and quantified scientific claims for easy to understand.
Hey, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love your insightful questions. It's been lovely just to kind of chat this through with you. I hope your listeners will enjoy some of this. And if they want to reach out, connect with me on my socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, or reach out to me, I would love to connect with them and have a conversation.
Surely. And we will definitely be mentioning your socials in the descriptions below. And listeners, do remember, we discussed a lot about the air pollution, the sugar impact, and, the health span. That is something new for me today. We have been focusing a lot on it, but yes, we never knew, the exact terminology. So, and remember, your body is always speaking to you, sometimes whispering, sometimes warning. I am trying to listen to it as much as I can. And I believe if I can do it, you can as well. So start listening to your body, start identifying, start exploring, just get out there and give your body a second chance. And if today's episode brought clarity to something you have been struggling with, whether it is stress, gut issues, hormone concerns, or lifestyle overwhelm, we invite you to share your worries with us anonymously on our mental health forum. The link is in the description. You know the drill. And remember, until next time, keep listening to your body because we are listening. Thank you.